How many times have I told you guys to get a pre-purchase inspection before you buy a car? This is a crazy situation here. Let's get started. Now before you guys get too crazy, say, hey, I thought you guys didn't work on old cars. We don't. This one slipped through the cracks. When the appointment was made, Crazy D heard 02 Mercedes. He wrote it down. And when it showed up, it's an 82 Mercedes. We obliged the customer, went ahead and take it in. We normally would not. The story on this car is really crazy and it's kind of sad at the same time. But before we dive into all the crazy things we found, let's take a look around it real quick. So just as the front license plate says, it is a 1982 380 SL. It is an R107. It is in decent shape, but it's definitely had a repaint. You can see some spots here on the hood where it's been touched up. But you can see there's kind of orange peel going on here, and a few other places there's orange peel, and there's a tape line right through here. You can see that it's been repainted. We can see our driver's side fog lamp is also cracked. As we go down this side, the wheels are actually in decent shape. The body is in decent shape, but like I mentioned, you can tell it's been repainted. It is a convertible, which that is in pretty good shape. The fabric and everything is pretty nice. The back viewing, it's not glass really, it's plastic. It's nice and clear. You can see through it really well. And the back end, it's not banged up or beat up or anything. Same thing on this side. Let's go ahead and hop under the hood. Here is our V8 engine. As denoted that it says it is a 380 SL. This is a 3.8 liter V8. It looks pretty decent under the hood, but this poor car is pretty tired. Got some miles on it, a lot of years on it. The one thing that's really crazy is that it came in with a complaint that once the engine warms up, it makes very loud dieseling noises. It runs really bad, it runs really rough, it misfires really hard. And they were curious, what is wrong with this thing? We got to check in the fuel system, we checked the ignition system, we got it up to what we thought was operating temperature. The gauge would show roughly around where it should be. But it was fooling us because it would start dieseling and acting up, and I could feel the engine felt a lot warmer than it should be. I had Danielson go ahead and check the antifreeze level. Right here at the reservoir was completely empty. Then I had him take the top radiator hose off. There was nothing there. I finally said, well, let's get a drain pan underneath and let's drain the antifreeze and see what are we working with here. There should be a couple gallons or even more antifreeze. This is what we had. That's it. This is where you can get in trouble with a customer leading you on, even though they don't intend to. There's no malice, there's no ill will here. They say once it gets to operating temperature, it runs rough. So okay, well, let's get it up to operating temperature and see what happens. It's not until after I started feeling the heat coming off the engine, I was like, something's not jiving here, something's not right. And when we found the antifreeze situation, we knew right away the engine's literally overheating. Luckily, it didn't damage the engine. It still runs fine. There's no blown head gaskets or anything. I don't know how it didn't hurt it, but it's actually fine. But I know that a coolant temperature sensor is designed to actually physically contact coolant and measure the temperature, not air. So you can have an engine get to overheating temperature and the sensor will read normal, because it's physically not even touching any coolant. There is none. This guy just bought this car and he was told it's in good shape and everything's ready to go, ready to run. Obviously there was no check done on the fluids. And I'm not getting mad at the guy or trying to dog him or anything like that. But what I am saying is you can very easily be taken advantage of in these situations. So the question is, where'd the coolant go? Let me show you. Here's our water pump, actually where the gasket is. You can see someone's tried to silicone it before. It was leaking literally down the block onto the ground. Now if we're going to take this thing apart and pull the water pump off to reseal it, we're going to put a new one back on. But this one is a little bit loose in the shaft anyways. But it definitely needed a new water pump to begin with. But it leaked all the coolant out. And no one ever bought... Someone had to have seen a puddle on the ground somewhere at some point. And they purposely didn't add any coolant, or I fully don't understand what's going on here. All as I know is it was leaking at the water pump. It caused no antifreeze to be in the system. It was causing it to run rough when it warmed up. After we put antifreeze in it and a new water pump, everything's back to normal. It doesn't do that anymore, amazingly. So this is where you take for granted that when you see a sticker or a piece of duct tape with service history just like this, showing they used Royal Purple oil and a filter and different things at this certain date, you take it for granted, well, they probably a well-maintained vehicle, it just has some issues. Obviously it's not been well maintained. Luckily nothing was hurt by running it with very low coolant. I wish the customer would have told me, but they didn't even know. So it kind of sucks to find that out in that manner. That really does suck. So there's more to the story, but before we dive in any further with that, let's go ahead and look underneath this car. Let's go ahead and take a peek underneath the car. Right behind this main pulley, which is like a greenish color, the coolant was literally pouring at some point down all over onto the ground. That's where the antifreeze went. This thing has some seepages here and there. The oil pan's pretty much dry. We'll check the brakes over here. Everything looks pretty good. Nothing loose. The shock is nice and dry. Sway bar link is good. Move to the other side. You can see there's a brand new caliper because the old one, whenever you hit the brakes, would literally pour fluid out onto the wheel. So that's been replaced. Nothing's loose there. Shock is nice and dry. Get back to our transmission here. Everything's nice and dry there. Here's our exhaust. Everything's intact. This would be the catalytic converter here, which is still here, luckily. Here's our resonator. Everything's intact there. Here's our flex disc. Still looks pretty decent. Check these brakes back here. They're about half gone, but they're still good. You do see that somebody put some spring spacers here, probably sags in the rear. So somebody in the past has installed those to try to remedy that situation instead of replace the spring. Our CV boots are good. The differential's fairly dry. CV boots are good here. Shocks are not soaked. Brakes are half gone. It does have a new fuel filter. I don't know if the pump is new, but it looks fairly new. Usually when they come with this little zigzag plastic piece, it's been replaced. Looks like we had a little impact here that tore this little drain hole open. You can actually see the spare tire. I'm actually touching the spare tire there. Kind of interesting. I'll mention more as we see here with the fuel pump and the fuel filter's been replaced. There's probably more to the story. Let's go ahead and check these tires. Okay, and here we find on the inside of the tires actually where it's at. 29th week of 2012. These are very old tires. Some things are starting to add up here that's showing that this car's been sitting a while. So let's talk about that. Let's get this thing back on the ground. So here's that caliper I talked about, and the pistons are actually leaking. You can see it's all wet. We did have one of the pistons pulled out, and it's just all rusty and nasty in there. The fluid has been flushed. The fluid looked like mud. It was really bad. So we got that taken care of. So when I say the caliper was leaking, I don't mean it was leaving a giant puddle. You could just tell that the bottom of the caliper was wet. The brakes still functioned just fine. But whenever the brakes were pressed, another small drop would come out and then another small drop, and it adds up to a wet bottom of the caliper. That will eventually get worse, and as I said, it was corroded and rusted inside of there. The rest of the system, how bad is it? I don't know. We'll talk about that here again in a minute as well. But it does have good brakes now, and the brakes are not leaking at the moment. Before we do that, we'll let Mrs. Wizard give you guys a tour of the really small interior.
Okay, ladies, gents, it's a good thing this is a small interior today because my voice is really shot. As a teacher, sometimes you get joys and lovely things happening in your day. Other days, you have a crappy day like I had today where I got to break up a fight between two freshman girls. And I yelled stop so many times, I might sound like a frog. So bear with me. You can see there, though, let's look at that dash. There we go. Got enough reflection off there. 114,000 miles. Being that this is an 82, okay, it's not obscene, but this car does show some of its age. We look up there at the dash. It is a nice dove gray. Looks in good shape. There's maybe a little bit of a bump right here where it's kind of coming up, but it's not cracked. Maybe some of the liners maybe are pulling off of there, but otherwise it looks like it's in okay shape, other than looks like it's flexing a little. Does have vintage classic Mercedes. I love these little vents because they always hit the exact spot you want, because somehow when you have more modern where they're limited on those vents where they can move to, they never get the spot you're wanting. As we move down, you'll see that they have added a Pioneer stereo, because that obviously would not have been standard in 1982. We move down a little more. There's our very classic single zone climate control right there. Have a nice little hidey hole right here where we can see there is the ashtray and the cigarette lighter still available in there. As we go down a little bit further, you'll see that the wood here has been taken off and it has been refinished. You can see that the varnish it's there, it's shiny, it's a little bit shinier in some spots than others, and see there's a couple of gouge marks that have now been sealed with varnish and stain. But other than that, it looks nice. At least it's not curling and cracked. As we move over to our door card and our seat, they are leather wrapped, all of them, and a nice dove gray, and they look in really good shape. The seats do have that very classic swooping bolster in here with very long column stitching as well. The bottom seat is in great shape as well and feels somewhat like a sofa. It's nice and cushy. So let's move to our back seat, if we want to call it that. It looks like a back seat. It's got a spot for 2, maybe 3, if you could call that hump in the center a back seat. I don't see seat belts back there, but maybe they are just hiding underneath below. I'm not so certain, but that is a very, very tight space back there. But as the wizard said, that back glass, or isinglass is what we used to call it on our boat when we still had that, is in really good shape. It's actually clearer than I've seen a lot of newer cars. Let me go ahead and turn our light off. Do our top check. Don't see any light spots coming through up there. Great way to check that top. So there, he did a good job in that inspection when he bought the car. It does look like the convertible top is in really good shape. So as we end up at our steering wheel, have that lovely Mercedes emblem in the center, and I really love vintage Mercedes. These things are absolutely beautiful, but good thing this is that small interior because my voice is killing me right now. I think we need to let the wizard talk more about what's going on with this car.
So I've been doing this for a number of years, and I've also been doing this long enough to know I can put 2 and 2 together and see what the story is on this car. Before the current customer bought this car, it's been sitting for a long time. Now, let me back up a little bit before we go too far. This is an assumption I'm making. I don't know this for sure. But this is an assumption I'm making that I think that this car sat for a long time. We know that the Bosch Jetronic system does not tolerate sitting with old dirty fuel in it for years. It will destroy the whole system. The injectors, the warm-up regulator, the distributor head, the accumulator, the filter, the pump, and it's thousands to get it fixed again. Somebody got a repaint job on it. They lacquered up the interior, made it look a little better, maybe put a top on it. They put a fuel pump and a fuel filter in it, probably didn't even clean the tank. The brakes have been sitting so long that there's mud. The fluid's basically turned to mud. And the antifreeze was almost gone. The customer bought it this way thinking it was in decent shape. I think somewhere along the line, a lot of things have not been disclosed to this customer, and I feel sorry for him. It really sucks. We did get it running. It's not overheating anymore. The engine's not damaged. It will run and drive now. It runs okay. But it idles still a little rough. And the reason for that is the injectors are clogged. They're old with the old fuel. The distributor head is not metering properly. If you try to make any adjustments at all on this distributor head, it just stalls. I talked to my buddy Cameron at DC Motor Works in Atlanta. He's a good friend. He owns a shop there. This is his specialty, these old Mercedes. He is an old Mercedes wizard. I sent him a picture of this, and his next response was 20 grand. I said, what do you mean? No, I'm talking about the car. I'm not talking about dollars right now. He said, no, that car will take 20 grand to get it right. He says, I've been through at least 30 of them. Every time, 20 grand. He said 5 of it will be the fuel system. Unfortunately, the customer said, just make it run again. I'm going to make it for a Sunday cruiser with the top down around town. That's it. I'm not going to do anything else with it. I don't have the money to be dumping 20 grand into this thing. Fix the brake, just the one side. Fix the coolant leak, take care of it, make it run again. Don't go any further. Because he doesn't want to put that kind of money into this car. So will the other brakes start leaking? I don't know, possibly. We did flush the system out, but we're not really got the okay to go any further than that. So as I mentioned also at the beginning of this video, Crazy D took this in thinking it's an 02. He misheard them, it's actually an 82. We were nice and obliged and went ahead and worked on it. And again, it's another situation why we don't work on the older cars. Because luckily this customer gets it. This car is probably not worth putting 20 grand into it to make it perfect again. But there's a lot of people that are out there, and we will not go down that road with you. It's a bad road to go down. You've seen my video. Actually, almost 400,000 people have seen my video of 6 cars that ruined the customers. And if you're not very careful, this very car could be another one. This could be the 7th one I could talk about. Luckily, the customer's not going to do that. It's unfortunate that it seems like that's happening a lot anymore, that people are trying to pass turds under the radar and hoping you'll buy it. Please get a pre-purchase inspection, not a post-purchase inspection. I'm going to underline the word pre-purchase inspection. Because it's easy to say, I love that car, it's beautiful, I'll get an inspection after I buy it, I'll just deal with whatever comes. And it could be this. I have found that over the years, a lot of people want to relive their high school days. A lot of people right now that are in their 60s and 70s want to relive the Porsche 928s, the old 380 SLs or the 450 SLs. This is what, this was cool when they were younger, and they finally at a place in life where they can buy one. But there's not a realization how much time has passed since the last time those cars were new. A lot of things could have happened. They were neglected. They've been in a wreck. They've been sitting somewhere in a field for 5 years or 10 years. This car is 40 years old. I actually saw a meme on Facebook that totally describes kind of that thought process. It's where someone put a picture of what they thought in their mind as a 20-year-old car, and it's in the 80s. It's a car from the 80s. And then they realize on this bottom half of the picture, an actual 20-year-old car is in the early 2000s. Wow, that much time has passed? Yes. This car is over 40 years old. So that poster you have in your room of a 380 SL, it's very rare that it matches. It's usually a lot of work and money, lots of money, that needs to make it look like that poster child or that poster car that you had. So again, we're not bashing the customer. That's not what we're doing here. What we're saying is you can get yourself in this situation without a pre-purchase inspection. We have fixed the things the customer will allow us to fix. We're not going any further. It will be a running and driving car. It will do what they want it to do. On Sundays, go on a cruise with the top down. It drives okay. But I would not want to take this car cross country. Anything could fail. Anything could happen. So if you're curious what kind of tools that we use to work on this old 380 SL, which we probably won't work on anymore, we try not to, check my Amazon affiliates link in the description below. We get a small cut and we really appreciate it. And make sure to hit the subscribe button because there's many more cool videos to come. Thanks for watching.